as well, which is fantastic. Apologies, guys. It's the first webinar we've done in a couple of weeks, so there is a couple of technical difficulties happening, which is not ideal for two of our guests who have taken their time to join us today. So apologies for just one moment, guys. I'm going to make sure we get this issue sorted.
That's no worries, Sean. We all appreciate that these things are subject to challenges sometimes.
Typically, they never happen on the pre-run, unfortunately. But like you say, we'll overcome it now very shortly. It's just the actual introduction piece I wanted to provide, and the slide that we had prepared to give a little bit more of a background to the guests. But for some reason, it's having some difficulties loading in the background. What I will do instead, guys, if you don't mind, and I suppose to make sure that I'm not delaying everyone any further, is I'm just going to read off, I suppose, the screen at this moment in time, and hopefully I will be able to share it then before the webinar is concluding at the end. So a little bit more information about yourself, Bronwyn. And again, just bear with me 2 moments while I can pull up the screen again. But I suppose first and foremost, Bronwyn, experience contracting, and I suppose you've dipped in and out of contracting throughout your career, essentially, which we'll hopefully delve into a little bit more. But as well as that, essentially, you have also contracted across a number of different countries. So you've contracted in Australia, the UK, Ireland, and you've worked with many US-led organizations. So with a passion for transformation and change management, Bronwyn has unparalleled experience working with people and leadership practices, with experience stemming from General Electric, Cisco, and many more. Bronwyn has successfully completed 10+ business integrations and over 40 technology change projects, alongside process and cultural integrations, and is most interested in areas of high growth and or SME businesses in tech-related industries. When it comes to experience as an independent professional, there is no part of working as an independent professional that Bronwyn has yet to face and overcome. And more recently, Bronwyn has took advantage of the flexibility that contracting offers to take on the volunteer role of co-lead for the Change Management Institute to help promote and develop the profession of change management in Ireland. So again, thank you very, very much, first and foremost, Bronwyn, for taking the time out to join us on what must be a very, very hectic schedule. But we are very, very grateful to have you. And I hope, again, that technical difficulty didn't take away from the introduction too much. But yeah, I suppose, first and foremost, thank you for joining us, Bronwyn. How has, I suppose, that introduction given you, I suppose, a feeling of what contracting has done for you as a career, or where would you like to start in terms of how you got involved in contracting?
Thanks, Sean. I'm really happy to be here because I feel so passionate about contracting. So I'm really delighted to be able to share my experiences with everybody on the call today. But my contracting experience, as you've highlighted there, started out in Australia, and I did a number of contracts in London as well. And after doing that, I went back into permanent roles for a little while, and I just found I had a really terrible time of some of the organisations I was working in. And so I really stepped back and took stock of what kind of work I enjoyed throughout my whole career. And what I found when I reflected on that was I was happiest in the contract roles that I had done in the past. And that was because they were exciting projects. The organisations I was working with on those projects were genuinely vested in the success of the projects, hence why they'd hired a contract resource. And thirdly, those projects tapped into the skills that I'm really great at. And so for me, it made a huge amount of sense for me to go back into a contracting career. And that's what I did back in 2012, and haven't looked back since. It's been one of the best decisions that I've made across, a two decade plus career so far.
Excellent. And it's really interesting to hear that from them, because I suppose when we do catch up with any clients and we're asking them essentially as to what attracted them, typically we hear about, I suppose, the financial benefits, obviously, that are often associated. Again, commonly we hear about, I suppose, the flexibility and the work-life balance. And I know that that's something that's been, like you say, touched on, and something that you might delve into a little bit more as we proceed with the webinar. But it's really interesting to hear that it was actually a passion for the role and a passion for the actual, I suppose, objective of the actual project and what you were getting out from it as well. So that's really, really interesting. In terms of, I suppose, and just delving back into that, what would you say then, I suppose, over your, and again, nearing 2-decade experience, has been the biggest benefit to you acting as an independent professional throughout that time? Because obviously you've had the experience of dipping in and out. So has that kind of remained consistent, or has there been any changes throughout?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the biggest benefit is not only doing work that I love to do and that I'm great at, it's also the flexibility that comes with that. So I know you just touched on it. That's often a requirement for a lot of other people going into contracting. But for me, it's there's two areas of flexibility that's really materialized through my contracting. One is that I've had the opportunity to negotiate the number of days that I worked with clients. So sometimes they can't always meet the day rate that I'd like to be able to charge. And so the way I kind of negotiate that is to say, well, look, what if I just work 4 days a week rather than 5? And pretty much every organization that I've ever worked with is happy to work with that kind of arrangement, which means for me that I get an extra day in the week. I get at least a 3-day weekend, and I get to work on those other things that are important in the rest of my life. So that's the first thing. The second benefit is that at the end of each contract, I always take time out for myself. So it's not, I could very easily go from one contract to another contract. And as you say, end the year with a huge amount of money in the bank account. That would be great. But actually, that's not what motivates me. It is about having that work-life balance. And so I use that time between contracts to refresh myself, to go and travel, spend time with family, and do those other things in life that perhaps we wish we were doing when we're working on a really busy project and a contract. So I find that level of flexibility is fantastic in terms of balancing out the things that are important for me. And while it may not be on a week-by-week basis, it's certainly across the whole life cycle of a year.
Excellent. I think that's something that's really important, I suppose, particularly for any of our clients that will be catching up on this in their own time afterwards, or obviously any of the clients that have joined us now for this webinar live. Essentially, the contracting can sometimes be all go. It's very important to take that time. And again, you're the only person that's in control of that time, essentially, and to remind yourself of that. It really has to be. And I suppose the last 18 months, if not longer now at this stage, have been a real kind of, I suppose, reminder in definitely for me personally, that downtime essentially is as important as, your most productive time throughout the years. It's without one, you can't be at your best with the other, essentially. And I suppose it's a blog piece that we've done quite recently in terms of scheduling, making sure as an independent professional that you're basically remaining disciplined with that. So it's very, very interesting to hear that, Bronwyn. And again, I think that's something, I suppose, anyone that is quite new to the industry or new to the sector should definitely take away from today's call as well, is that it's very, very important, despite the fact that no one is going to come knocking on your door. There's not going to be a HR department essentially telling you when to take your holidays. You have to remain disciplined with that. I suppose just moving on then, in terms of, again, looking back at your career to date, Bronwyn, do you think working as an independent professional has essentially presented any opportunities that may not have come across, that you may not have come across if you were working as a traditional employee?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest opportunities is that every time you go to a new organization, you have the opportunity to learn about new ways of working. So whether that's new technologies that they're using, whether it's new work practices, it might be different leadership styles, or just a whole range of different things or problems, in fact, that different organizations experience. And I think every time you go to a new organization as a contractor, you're taking those different experiences with you. And because perhaps you're turning over contracts more frequently than an employee would, then you're in a position where you're constantly exposed to these new different ways of working. And that brings a much richer experience that you can take to the next contract with you. So every time you do a new assignment, new learnings makes you much more valuable to the next client. And again, you've obviously taken away new skills and learnings, for your personal development.
Absolutely. And again, I suppose from ICON's perspective, and just to delve into that a little bit more in terms of the constantly learning piece, obviously as a contractor and as an independent professional, it's something that's, I suppose, deemed essential to, especially if you want to reach, I suppose, the pinnacle of that daily rate market, whereby upskilling, constantly kind of evolving your skills, and again, developing what you already know, like you said, Bronwyn, is essentially very, very important. But I think that when we speak to people again and we speak about upskilling, they tend to think that upskilling has to be a case that it's study outside of the workplace. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way at all. Obviously, there's an awful lot of skills that you can pick up from colleagues and I suppose other people that are working on them projects with you.
Yeah, I mean, like, perfect example of that would be, you know, as you mentioned in my introduction, I'm the co-lead for the Change Management Institute in Ireland. And so we do these type of events for our members on a constant basis. It doesn't require us to spend, you know, the people that attend doesn't require them to spend any money to attend if they're a member. But you know, these are kinds of experiences that are cheap and cheerful, I suppose, that keeps you being constantly refreshed in terms of the skill sets. But then coupled with those regular assignments, then you know, you can create a really rich learning experience without having to spend a lot of money or have your employer pay for learning and development fees, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I suppose, again, we've kind of gone through a couple of the benefits that you face. Would it be fair to say that you faced any challenges, Bronwyn, or could you think of any challenges that you faced whilst working as an independent professional? Because as much as obviously we want to shine a light on the positives, we also don't want to ignore the fact that there may have been challenges, obstacles, etc., that you've overcome.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think one of the biggest challenges or adjustments that I had to make moving from a permanent role into a contracting role was recognizing that, one, I'm probably never going to be the budget holder as a contractor. So I'm always going to have to probably build a more robust business case than somebody who might be in a permanent role who holds a budget. So that's one thing. I think the second then is around the level of decision-making capability that you have as a contractor. So while I've worked with some really fantastic clients who, you know, through making sure I'm constantly delivering, I build trust with the client, and then usually I'm empowered to be able to just crack on and get stuff done. However, there are always those occasions when, as a contractor, you always have to remember that you're working for a client. And that means that there are times when you're not empowered to go and execute on activities. You need to make a recommendation to the client about what they could or should be doing, and that ultimately they're going to have the decision-making power on that. And if I compare and contrast of being in a permanent role, often I would just be able to go off and deliver on those recommendations, or you know, when you're in a discussion with your manager. But as a client, the client then sometimes makes decisions that you're not that might not be what you've recommended, because they decide they don't want to spend the money, or they don't have the time, and they actually just need something that's a little bit more quick and dirty rather than a proper, full, robust solution. So you have to be prepared to kind of accept that sometimes the client doesn't want the full, range of what you're offering, and that you have to just accept that they might be happy with the, second or third option that you'd present. And you've just got to be willing to kind of crack on and buy into that and get on board and deliver it. So I think that for me is the biggest challenge for somebody who always sets a really high bar about what I deliver. And works at a certain pace that sometimes, again, that the client doesn't always want to work at that pace, and you just got to meet the client where they're at and work in that way with them.
I think that, again, that's a really, really good point, and it's something that actually wasn't mentioned in the previous catch up that we had with our clients, and something that, again, I think that would be massively valuable, especially to anyone, like I say, that's new to the industry, is that, like you say, Bronwyn, your position essentially changes. It's not like traditional employment where you can kind of go back and barrage your manager essentially and try to push them over the line that little bit further. Essentially, it is all about delivering what the client is asking for. And again, it may not be the first idea or suggestion that you come up with that comes, I suppose, to their want, or I suppose to their desire immediately. But again, it's all about having that adaptability as an independent professional to be able to pivot, change, and I suppose deliver essentially, like you say, exactly what's been requested. I suppose before we do let you go, Bronwyn, I'm curious if there is, I suppose, any other learning points essentially that you could pass on to, I suppose, not only future female independent professionals, but equally future male independent professionals about, I suppose, is there anything that you would do differently from your experience as an independent professional? Or I suppose how that could lead into tips, I suppose, of what not to do or what they should do for anyone that's looking at contracting.
Yeah, so for me, there's a small handful of things that I guess I've learned over the last 8 to 10 years of contracting. So the first is when we're coming out of permanent employment, sometimes we don't necessarily have all the network connections that we need to get that first assignment or that first couple of assignments. And in that sense, making friends with recruiters is really important, right? You've got to be able to, for most of us in contracting, marketing our own skills is not what we do best. And so we need to find those people who can market us to the people who are employing our skill sets. So while I know recruiters get a lot of slack, I think it's important that you invest the time to make friends with recruiters, make sure they know who you are, what you're looking for, and be in constant contact with them. The second thing I think is around learning how to budget. And this is really important because there are times when you'll find that you're between contracts and you need to know that you're going to have the funds to be able to survive between those contracts. Now, I was the worst person in the world for budgeting when I first started contracting, and I was dreadful in terms of making sure I was keeping up with all my accounting. So this was obviously pre-Icon, because that would never happen at Icon Accounting. But I would say that in terms of that budgeting process, being really clear around what do I need to pay myself to make sure that I'm meeting all my financial commitments, but I've got enough held back that I am able then to bridge the gap in between those contracts if I need to. And then I think the third piece of things that I learned, Icon is actually the third accounting firm that I have worked with since I started contracting. And I cannot stress, and I'm not being paid to say this obviously, but I cannot stress how important it is to find an excellent accountant. And the reason being is that for most of us is not what our core capability is, right? We go and do as contractors what we are great at. And the accounting area is clearly one where there's a lot of rules and guidance that is in place that we need to make sure that we're complying with. And as I said, this is the third accounting firm I've worked with, and I love working with Icon Accounting because I know I'm in really good hands and I'm going to get a really responsive turnaround from Lindsay if I have any stupid questions that I need to ask about accounting, to help me negotiate contracts or to make sure I've got my accounts done correctly. So, I think that piece around having an accountant that you have confidence in, that can provide timely responses, and make sure that you're not going to be like me in my first year of contracting, where I ended up with a huge tax bill because I didn't have the right accountant on board to advise me about what I needed to do and make sure that that I had, all my accounts done in a timely way, and knowing exactly what I could or couldn't submit as part of my financials through the course of my financial year. And then I think that final point, and then I'll let you hand it over to Sarah, is just around, if you're starting out and you are nervous about becoming a contractor, I wanted to share just a bit about my personal lifestyle, which is that I'm the primary breadwinner for the family. My husband is an artist. He's in his second year at college, and he's studying full time. And so when I decided that I wanted to go into contracting because that's what made me happy, we did sit down and we had a really serious conversation around how do we want to make the bills that we're going to need to pay. And so having that kind of dialogue up front around what the risks of that were for us and how do we make sure that we manage the money between us to make sure that we would never find ourselves in a situation where we couldn't pay the bills, I think was really important up front, so that we're both on the same page about what does it mean for us. And I'm really pleased to say that right now we're mortgage free, and we're delighted that we're finally in the house that we've renovated for the last 12 months through COVID. So, it is doable to be a contractor, to be a female, and be the only salary earner in a family, and really enjoy that contracting experience. So on that, I'll hand it over to Sarah to share her experiences.
Roman, thanks so much. And again, even delving into your personal, I suppose, highlights there. Congratulations, first and foremost. But that's a query we constantly come across is, you know, I don't think I'm going to get a mortgage, or I have fears about getting a mortgage. And like you say, your story there essentially points out that it can be done. Like you say, it may need some planning, it may need some discipline, but essentially with the right planning, anything is possible. And like you said, from whether it's scheduling that holiday in between your, you know, your first contract finishing and your next contract starting, whether it is, you know, a mortgage application or whatever the case may be, there's always a way around it. So again, I suppose before I do let you go, Bronwyn, I think it would be very rude of me not to kind of, I suppose, just delve into one more thing that you mentioned and touched on. With being a co-lead of the Change Management Institute, where can people find out some more information if they are interested in having a conversation with yourself or about getting involved?
Yeah, so the Change Management Institute, just type it into your choice of internet browser. You'll find us relatively easily. We have a Change Management Institute Ireland chapter. And again, you'll find a group on LinkedIn, both for the Global Change Management Institute, but also for the Ireland chapter. We do events every month or thereabouts. So I'm more than happy to welcome people to the chapter. And if anybody wants to reach out to me directly, feel free to do so through LinkedIn.
Can't thank you enough, Bronwyn. Again, thank you very, very much for sharing all your insight. It's greatly appreciated. Sarah,
thanks, it's been a pleasure.
Sarah, I suppose first and foremost, thank you for your patience, obviously, in terms of going through that. But again, welcome and thank you very much for taking the time to join us. If you don't mind, similarly, I'm going to just do a quick introduction into yourself. I'm not going to try and share any screens, just in the fear that there will be another technical error. So I'm going to read it off the screen again, but I will make sure that, I suppose, your profiles are well and truly known if you would like them to be. Sarah has been acting as an independent professional supporting her clients in the financial industry for over 4 years now. With direct experience in the financial industry before commencing her contracting journey, Sarah was concerned, I suppose, about the security behind a short-term contract initially. Sarah's background is in business studies, but has also seen success ranging from roles in CRM, project management, and also business analytics. So we're thrilled to welcome you, Sarah. And again, we're extremely grateful that you're taking the time out to share with us today.
No problem. Thanks, Sean, for having me.
Not at all, not at all. I suppose similarly to Bronwyn and how we started with Bronwyn, if you wouldn't mind kind of giving us an introduction, Sarah, into, I suppose, first and foremost, what attracted you to contracting, or essentially how did you get into the sector itself?
Yeah, well, unlike Bronwyn now, I'm relatively new. So I'm coming into my 5th year now in contracting. I started off in the financial industry. I started way down the ladder, phone banking. You called up to check your balance on your account. That was me at the other end of the phone. And it was from there, it became, like Bronwyn said, it becomes a passion. You begin to love your job. You want to know more. You want to educate yourself more. You keep going through. So I kept pushing myself and learning, kept going through so many different departments, worked my way through, I think, about 8 or 9 different departments in the bank, until I found myself in change management. Which is, I just loved it, just absolutely loved it. It just opened up a whole new world of just so much you could do, so much potential, and loved it, absolutely loved it. And I was so lucky, I had an amazing mentor. He was a fantastic manager, and he actually took me under his wing, trained me in how to be a business analyst, gave me projects to run with by myself. And it was from there that he gave me the push. He was like, I think you need to look at it. I think you need to go and have a look at contracting. You know, he was like, you can stay here, you can work your way up. But like, you know, he's like, there's so much more out there, so many companies, so much you can do. And it's not even the financial, it's like, broaden your horizons, go and see what other companies are doing, go and see how they run a change management team, go and see how they work a project, go and see what they're working on and how different all the IT systems are. So that was really the push I got. Yeah, it was an ex-manager of mine that really just, you know, gave me that confidence. So I had no idea where to start. Started talking with a couple of the contractors that were in where I was working at the time. And I suppose one thing that they all had in common is that they were all using Icon. So they were like, make that your first port of call. So I got in touch, met. I actually went out to the business, sat down, laid out all my concerns, you know, like Bronwyn was saying, financially, how I was going to do it, gaps between contracts, you know, pensions, I was losing the stability, you know, how myself and my husband were going to do it. But I have to say, walking out after 20 minutes there, I felt so at ease. There wasn't even another thought in my mind. That was it. I was going contracting. That was that was it. I nearly walked out of there with the company label that day. It was very much down to, like, they answered all my questions, all the concerns I had, you know, about, you know, filing tax returns. To me, this was a whole new world of like, oh God, I don't want to get into that, you know. And then I was really worried about, we hadn't bought our house at the time. How would that work out? Oh God, what if I wanted to go on maternity leave? What if, just this huge amount. And I have to say, everything was just put at ease. So yeah, I just kind of, then my next step after Icon then was I went in and met with a recruiter, and as Bram was saying, you have to get in with the recruiters. And I was just so lucky that first interview I got, and I've been with that same company since. So
Excellent.
I've been contracting there now nearly 5 years. The contracts are 6 months rolling. So they have been rolling. Now, obviously, there are times when you think, oh, you know, there's uncertainty in the market, or there's uncertainty in your sector. So, you know, you may not get that other contract. And I have explored other companies. I've done other interviews. I've gotten other jobs. But when this contract has come through, I've just always been ready to accept it, because I'm happy. I'm happy with what I'm doing, and I'm happy that I'm never doing the same project twice, and I'm always working on something new. So for right now, it has been amazing to be with the same company for 5 years on a rolling contract.
Brilliant. Brilliant, Sarah. And again, I suppose congratulations on that, because from any conversations that we have with contract recruiters, and again, it's similar to yourself, Bronwyn, if you're able to build relationships with contract recruiters, it says an awful lot about you as a contractor and what you bring to the table, essentially. So that hasn't happened by accident. I'd also like to put a massive alert out to the sales team, because again, despite the fact that it wasn't planned, you're doing a fantastic job, both of you, on terms of selling Icon accounting services. So as fantastic as it is to get feedback, I would say there's a couple of nervous bodies within the, I suppose, advisor team at the moment. But again, Sarah, just to kind of delve on to, and you've touched on a couple of the benefits the contracting has kind of given you. None more so stood out to me in terms of when you were speaking about it there, is the actual desire that you're happy with your role as well. It's a case that it kind of excites you. Like you said, you're not working on the same project, or you're not doing the same kind of mundane tasks. And I understand that there's definitely sides to it that can be mundane. It's not a case that every single part of the role is exceptionally fulfilling or exciting or, you know, thrilling in a sense. But at the same time, you are excited by the fact that, look, this is something new. I'm potentially going to pick up, you know, new skills, new tools that I can bring forward, essentially. And again, it'll only further your experience.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, a lot of the systems, a lot of the stuff I was doing, the way we were writing requirements, the way we were building stuff, was not what I had come from. It was all new. We haven't done the same thing twice, but yes, there are the regulatory projects. There are the things that aren't so exciting, but I work in an amazing team. I really do. I've been with that same team for the 5 years, but we're constantly growing and evolving. I'm lucky also, it's a very female orientated team. There's 9 of us on the team, 4 of which are permanent. So the other 5 are actually contractors, and there's only 1 male, the poor male on the team there. poor guy has to listen to us, but it's been great. And there's a lot of, I suppose, very powerful female leadership where I am, and especially in the IT sector, and to see so many IT developers being females, to see, like, it's just been fantastic. So it's always been something that's just, it's been exciting. I've never come away a day and gone, oh, I definitely don't want to go back there tomorrow. So it's really kept me going. It's been fantastic.
Similar to ourselves at Icon, I know I had this brief conversation with you when we caught up before, Sarah, but typically as well, Icon accounting is absolutely female dominated, or has been for a long time. We're trying to pull it back now for the boys. There's been a couple of new hires and we're trying to level it out, but essentially the vast majority of the work that's done at Icon accounting is done by females, and again, without them, I don't know where we would be. So it must be inspiring though as well, listening to seeing that, and again, credit to, I suppose, to the firms that both of you have worked for, in a sense that essentially there is constant signs of progression as well. It's not a case that, you know, there's always something new, there's always a new project that could be coming on, and that's always fantastic to have. Have you faced any in particular challenges, Sarah, that, you know, have been difficult to overcome as an independent professional?
I think the biggest challenge for me was that I was always someone that wanted to progress, and I wanted to move my career on. And I saw that as moving up the ladder, becoming your assistant manager, becoming your manager, taking on a team. So when I came over to this contract, that's it. You are the company, you are head of it, and then you're brought into a client, and, you know, you're become part of a team and integrated in. So it's a bit harder to kind of go, okay, I report in. I will never be that person that, like Bronwyn said, you know, you're taking charge of the budget or you're doing these things. You will have to, but it's something you come around to. So it's been a challenge, I would say, personally, just on that level, just seeing that, you know, you will never have a team under you, you will never be that manager, but it's been equally as liberating to not have any of that and not have the politics also of it. So yeah.
I find that really interesting though as well, actually, that you've mentioned that, because again, that's one of the conversations that kind of constantly happens around when people are comparing, I suppose, what it's like working as a traditional employee versus working as an independent professional. And one of the biggest things, obviously, and one of the biggest benefits for a long time has been that removing yourself from the office politics, if it exists. I'm not saying it exists, obviously, in all workplaces, but in some places it can exist. But from what you've just said about your experience there, and in particularly your team, essentially, it's nice to see that there's that kind of mix. And I don't get the sense that there's kind of any separation between the team. It's
none. We are a team, and although I said there are 4 permanent, there's no difference. We all, if there's a night out, we'd all have the night out. If there's something going on in the team, we're all doing it together. We're involved in every meeting that's going on. There's no exclusion just because you're a contractor. You feel just as equally part of the team as anyone. The only difference to me is that, you know, at the end of the day, you get paid differently. I'm not getting their direct payment. I'm coming through, and yeah, there is a chance that your contract may not be renewed, or they could say, look, we don't have the budget for you at the end of the week. But other than that, you feel just as equally part of the team. I really don't feel any different about it all.
excellent, and I love to hear that, because again, I suppose when I first joined Icon Accounting, and I suppose I didn't have an in-depth knowledge in being 100% transparent in terms of, I suppose, the independent professional market. But one of the things that kind of constantly stood out to me was the fact there of you could potentially be, you know, us and them, rather than it being a segregation and a mixed kind of a team environment. And that kind of, again, it does put fear into people that are considering contracting for the first time, that, oh, well, I'm going to be flying solo essentially here, you know, not only from a responsibilities and a payment and taxation and compliance side of things, but also actually maybe physically in the workplace.
Yeah, and it is, and a lot of people and a lot of contractors did say that they did feel that in certain situations, and I have to say I haven't felt it. I haven't felt like I'm different to anybody else. You know, and the team has, I suppose, the longer you're there too, it's the more they trust you, the more they know how you work. So you really do become part of the team. So being there now, I'm running projects, I'm running different things myself. So I mean, I'm as good as basically, and they have talked to me about going permanent. It just doesn't suit me, but I feel equally as part of the team there. I wouldn't worry. I think if you go in with the mindset that you're not any different to anyone else and that they're not any different, and you just integrate yourself like you would meeting new colleagues, I think it just works, I think.
Again, I think that's a really, really important point you've made there. And it was something that actually came up in a conversation with our expert contract recruiters, tips and hints. And one of the things that they pointed out was sometimes contractors can have a little bit of an ego about themselves when they come into a workplace, and, you know, they essentially separate themselves. It's not a barrier. It's not an invisible barrier. It's a case where a lot of the time they want to be separate. So I think that, again, like most things in life, what you put in is essentially what you'll get out there. And similar to what you've just said there, in terms of if you don't go in thinking you're any different and you act the same as, you know, everyone else is acting, no one's going to see you as any different or treat you as any different.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely.
Perfect. I suppose I wanted to touch on, again, if there was any tips that you would give to someone that's starting out, Sarah, I suppose from your own experience, or is there something that you did that you wouldn't do again, or is there anything, I suppose, that you would change in your experience today?
No, I think I'm very happy with the way I went about things. I think I was happy with the time I done it. So I think, no, I don't think if I was to be asked, would there be anything I'd have done differently? No, I definitely don't think so. I think going into it, for me personally, my major concerns were, how was I going to handle the taxes at the end of the year? How was I going to pay myself? How are my husband and I going to get through, you know, like Bronwyn said, those monthly budgets or those mortgage payments that needed to be made? I'm from Mayo. Our overall plan was to move back. So how are we going to do that? Retain contracting, because a lot of the jobs are city based and are up in Dublin. And how we were going to do that, and apply for a mortgage with me being also the breadwinner in the house. My husband has gone back to a new job, so he started very much on the lower end of the scale again. So it was doing all those things, you know, and then we had our little girl, it was taking the time out to do maternity leave. Those were major concerns I had. And I have to say, it's none of it has just been an issue going through it all. Like every step of the way, going through even the move, how that would work, how that, like, Icon just sorted everything with the taxes. I just take them at the end of the year, I fill in my bit of paperwork, but all the majority of the work is done. I just need to sign it off and make sure that everything is there. Like, it's fantastic. Like, to know that the pay slips come every week, I don't need to worry about the tax being taken. Like, it's just, it so puts you at ease. All you have to worry about is that you're doing a good job yourself with the work that you're doing and maintaining that contract if you want to maintain it. So that, like, everything else was taken out of it. I mean, you do have to budget, you do have to have those conversations with your other half, but it works out. We haven't had a situation, luckily, where we have had to worry about any of those things. And we have had we've moved west, we've bought a house, we went through the mortgage process relatively, I would have to say, at ease. Everything just worked out all better. Had I not been contracting, had I gone back into permanency, we would not have had any of these opportunities. And I know that for definite. We wouldn't have, because at the time I was in permanent employment, like, we were struggling to save to get to pay for our wedding, to do all those basics around the house. We have been afforded that luxury. But I found, talking with Icon, then I was given the next step of advice, financial advisors. And that's a great free service to go and do that, to be able to sit and talk to someone and think long term. I was able to talk about pensions, you know, my concerns that if I ever got seriously ill and I'm being the main breadwinner. So all that was even put at ease. So I have to say, they're the things I would do first. I would think about what my major concerns are, and I would have a talk with an Icon again and say, well, look, this is where I want to get to. This is what I'm concerned about. And this is, you know, I found everything can be settled with a conversation, and almost most of the time is with Icon on these things. Yeah, Natasha has been, I probably email her, I probably wreck her head more often than not with questions, but she's been amazing, because I would just email off and go, well, okay, you know, I have to take maternity leave, and how would that work? So we built up our savings. We took the maternity, I was able to take my 6 months off, and, you know, you do these things and it works out better, because I walked straight back into the same contract I had walked out of 6 months earlier. And you know, if you have that relationship, like you said, with your employment and with all that, it just becomes a flow. You just dip in and out like you were a permanent employee. There was no difference. So yeah, I'd say anyone that has those type of concerns, you know, of women going into contracting, I would say don't be. Everything is so much easier and can be solved. And it does put a lot of the financial burdens at ease, definitely.
Again, I think from what I've heard from both of you, again, I can't thank you enough in terms of the feedback, obviously, on behalf of Icon Accounting, but I know Natasha and Lindsay will certainly be jumping you both to the top of the Christmas list as well for the fine words and the kind words that you've spoken about them. In terms of, and again, I don't want to delay too much longer. I know that I suppose people will be trying to get back to lunch, and I want to give you guys obviously a chance to hopefully grab something to eat before you guys have to run back to your busy schedules as well. One of the things I wanted to just touch on again, and it's something that both of you have brought up, is the fact that essentially, if you do have any concerns, essentially it's worthwhile at least having a conversation. Have a conversation with an accountant. Doesn't necessarily have to be Icon Accountant, but someone that understands contracting. Essentially, we obviously hope that it will be Icon Accountant, and we're confident that if it is, again, I suppose hopefully the service will suffice and it will go above and beyond your expectations. But more so, make sure you're speaking to an accountant that actually understands the independent professional market, because a lot of the times there's different things that can be presented that may not be relevant to, I suppose, your traditional clients from a high street accountant. So I would definitely say speak to I suppose, someone that does understand the market. The second thing, and I think you touched on it there, Sarah, as well, was the financial review, the financial consultation. It's always worthwhile having one if there are any fears about, you know, if you're at a certain stage in terms of applying for a mortgage, or like you say, if you've got plans for maternity leave, whatever the case may be, it's worthwhile having a conversation before just completely discounting the opportunity, essentially. I can't thank you enough in terms of obviously taking the time out to join us, as well as obviously all the insights that you have provided, guys. I suppose, on behalf of the team at Icon Accounting, thank you extremely and thoroughly, I suppose, for, like I say, contributing your own time. I understand exactly how busy you are. I think that an awful lot of our clients and future candidates, hopefully even that are considering contracting roles, will definitely get an awful lot out of this. But I think that the main message should be, before we do close, typically I would have, I suppose, a nice little slideshow presentation and maybe a slide to close off the thing, but I'm not going to even tempt fate now. But what I would say, the closing remarks are, make sure you're in touch with your recruiters, make sure you're staying in touch with your recruiters and in touch with the market itself and in line with the opportunities that are out there. Make sure you're learning how to budget, whether that's, like you say, reaching out to your account manager at your accountants, whether it be at Icon Accountant, or if it's the financial consultation you have. But more importantly, know that there is a solution and a plan essentially that can be achieved for regardless of the situation, whether that is saving for a mortgage, whether that is planning maternity leave, or whatever the case may be. It's definitely worthwhile getting in touch and having a conversation. Guys, I can't thank you again enough for taking the time out to join us, but from all of the attendees, from all of the people that will be catching up, obviously through the recorded episode that will be live available on the portal and on the app, thank you very, very much for taking out the time, and I can't understate how much we appreciate it.
Thanks, Sean. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Not at all.
Thank you.
Apologies for the technical difficulties as well, guys, but we will be back very soon. So what I will say is, make sure to stay up to date with our LinkedIn page and the rest of our socials, just so we can, I suppose, release in the upcoming webinars that are going to be released in the coming weeks. One of them will be specifically about electric vehicles. I won't go into too much more detail other than that. The other one will be with regards to cryptocurrency. And like I mentioned at the start of the webinar, we will also be looking at a budget 2022 review. So make sure you're staying in touch. And again, thank you for taking the time out. None more so than to our two very, very successful and experienced guests, Bronwyn and Sarah. Thanks a million. I'll speak to you soon.